term definition in Article 1B, General, Section 1, and adding Article 3, Section 85-1 through 85-5, electronic enforcement, provide for the enforcement of certain traffic signal and speed limit violation by automatic means, and provide penalties for traffic signal violation enforced by automatic means without a known.
Mr. Smith, Ms. Sylvester is here for the administration to speak on that matter.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Y'all may recall that this body entertained some presentations from particular service providers for these camera systems. What we have done is provided in our Code of Ordinances to provide for a civil penalty. Right now, if you speed or run a red light, it calls for prosecution as a criminal traffic ticket down at city court. This, since it's going to be a camera system and it's going to be linked to ownership of the vehicle, is going to instead, as an alternative, call for only a civil penalty. It's going to be processed through administrative means, and that is what the text of this ordinance does, is it sets up that system and it sets forth what the penalties would be. But it's not something that's going to go on someone's individual driving record. Questions?
You know, I just been thinking about that. I guess I was kind of 50-50 on it. How many new officers did we just hire? 10. We hired 10 new officers. Now we need to do some additional stuff to help them do their job. Sooner or later, I just think you need to bear down, and I'm not talking to you, and it's a camera taking pictures. I mean, we have enough officers to do their job. I'd just rather us have folk out there that are doing things and not depending solely on technology. And I'm not saying we don't need to deter in here and there, but I just don't think it's well received to take pictures of people's vehicle and then try to ticket them. And,
well, and Mr. Lawson, that's a very good point, and that was one of the potential drawbacks in other places. These types of systems came under attack when they did make it a criminal penalty, and that is precisely why we have revised ours and other people in other parts of the country. One of the main benefits to the citizens, this is not about trying to take the place of any officers. The statistical evidence on on places that have implemented these systems, the reduction in the number of intersectional accidents is staggering. It's truly a tremendous public safety benefit.
so it will be a lesser penalty if a camera catches you speeding through a red light.
Correct. There's still
But
an
if
appeal
an officer
process.
catches you speeding through that same red light, you have a different penalty.
Correct.
And-
Because
and-
there's a different, excuse me, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Mr. Lawson, I'd also like to point out this system will not cost the city anything, and it actually frees up the officers to do other work. If a person speeds through a red light and the picture is taken and they're not the actual driver of the car, that person is not ticketed. Say if I was in your car speeding and the citation came to your house, you wouldn't have to pay it. You understand what I'm saying?
And how do you prove who was speeding?
Well, if we couldn't prove it,
Family of
then-
6, all have access to the vehicle, who pays for the
if
ticket.
we couldn't prove it, then nobody would be cited.
So, okay.
That's actually, there's a couple of different ways the systems work, Mr. Lawson. I don't recall which company it was that came before this body, but some of them do actually take a visual of the individual driver. Others are simply tied to the license plate. What we have prepared is, in our ordinance, would track it to the owner. And then, as I said, there is an appeal process, and that's what's set forth in this ordinance as far as if you dispute that you weren't the one responsible. And there's certainly due process in this, but it's not the same standard that would come into play in the event that the driver is pulled over by an officer who has to spend that amount of time issuing a speeding ticket through an intersection or a red light violation through a particular intersection.
Mr.
It does free them up.
The people with whom I speak when I go to neighborhood meetings are all wanting community policing. Mr. Lawson, this frees people up, these 10 new hires, to do the job that we really want them doing. Sets up a civil penalty scheme. It doesn't cost the city any money. And the way it's set up, if we can't prove it and that burden's on us, we don't bring the case and they can easily defeat it. So it's sort of, there's no real cost to the city at all. It's just another tool that most cities who are progressive have looked at and are implementing in some fashion. And we took the time to ensure that the way in which we are implementing it is not as onerous on the citizens and ensures additional fairness and due process.
What you're suggesting, which is causing me the trepidation, is inconsistencies in the penalties.
No, what I'm suggesting is that when people know there are cameras, they tend to slow down, which saves lives and saves insurance rates and helps the area.
But the penalty is not the same if an officer catches you.
Right,
versus
because
a
an
camera.
officer can testify in court directly and has you pulled over, and it makes it a lot better. So here, we've set forth that as a thing to counter against what you were concerned about, which is that folk are driving through and having a camera do it instead of a person.
And Mr. Lawson, the reason that the penalty is greater in criminal court is because the burden of proof is higher.
I understand that. I'm just saying
It's
we
much
have,
harder for us to prove
if a camera
crime
sees you
than
running
a
late,
civil
you have one
offense.
penalty then if a camera doesn't catch you. I'm not saying, I like the deterrent part. I agree with that. I just have a problem with
We
penalty
patterned
systems.
this ordinance after one particular company, because the company that did the presentation to us back, they had set their penalties, they set the penalties already, because when you pay, you would pay directly to them and not to the city.
Correct. Both of the companies that presented, as it's set forth in the fact sheet, we don't come out of pocket on any of this. Whatever monies are paid in the civil fines, their fee is earned off of the actual
Usually
recovered
$10 to $40.
amounts. The fee schedule that we used in guiding us was based on the city of Lafayette. They recently implemented one of these systems, and so we used their particular scale as far as the 5 to 10 miles per hour over call first 25% penalty.
But we don't have a particular company that we are targeting with this.
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, we made some substantial revisions from whenever we sent our request for proposals, for example, to formally entertain proposals and give additional companies an opportunity. We made that very general, and as I talked about with the different types of camera systems, we didn't just limit it to only a license plate or only a driver identification. I mean, we gave them a good bit of flexibility in that so that we can get the best system, the one that's going to work best for Alexandria.
When you looked at penalties and fees based on what other cities have done, what percentage of that fee went back into the city's coffers based on the provider who put in the system?
It was my recollection, and Chief Hay, you may have recalled this more than I do. I thought it was maybe a 3% fee that they took.
It's a very small fee.
Right, and then all the rest of that goes back into us. But
I think that varied with the companies that made the presentation. There was a little difference, but it was not an extremely high fee.
yeah, I don't remember the exact percentage, but it was relatively small.
As I recall the presentations, the major differences in the two companies that we looked at was in the type of equipment they had and the capabilities of the equipment. And I don't remember which one was which, but it seemed to me also that their suggested pricing on this stuff, or their take, I guess you'd say, was relatively the same. It was a small percentage.
Right, and modeling off of another Louisiana city that also has the same criminal citation structure under the state statutes was logical from our standpoint.
I'm sure that our RFP will be ours and not someone else's modified, but the other thing I recall is they collected all the money, if I'm not mistaken, sent it to us and we sent their part back.
That's an option. That's not necessarily going to be
Whatever's
the
the
way,
best.
the way that we select.
Okay.
We've left that open to
I'm just trying to,
negotiation.
that's what I recalled, I don't remember exactly.
Right.
I have a question for clarification. We were talking about.
Can you come to the podium, please?
This is for my personal clarification. You were talking about the civil penalty and the criminal penalty. My question is, if a person that has run the caution light or run the red light, and if they are involved in an accident, okay, will those pictures be used in a criminal, can they be used in a criminal case?
Yes, they can.
That is available. There's a certain period of time of archive. Some of the different systems have actual video capability in addition to still pictures. And you bring up a good point that I need to make also. If an officer does observe someone with one of these violations, if they issue the ticket, the civil penalty doesn't apply.
Okay, that's what I was trying to see. Which one was supersede? Because something, a criminal act happened, so then you wouldn't have that civil notification of, watching you on camera running that light.
Correct, and there's a specific provision.
Yeah.
Another question. What is the duration of the contract, or what is the cancellation privileges? Because it's conceivable that we're going to have a true cry of people say, I resent the fact that I got some little picture there, and they're going to do that, and that's not so. And after a while, they resent it, and I know when to stop and when not. If we get too much criticism, as we did with meters, a lot of other things we do we reserve the right to have a 30-day cancellation clause, or what?
Mr. Silver, that was actually one of the specific points that we addressed, because from the outside company standpoint, they're providing the material. I mean, it's a service. We're not buying anything from them. It's all their equipment, and they're investing in that. But we did specifically already question them about, well, what about a trial period? Because there can be some negative perception on this. As I said, I think the numbers are going to speak to themselves. When you look to the numbers, it's much more positive for a city than negative. But we will specifically address that as far as on the front end, how much time we would have to commit so that we're not overly bound. There's no requisite in any of the contracts, regardless of the fact that the outside company's fees would be based on the collection of these civil penalties, but the ultimate review lies with us. In this case, we envision a particular police officer would review each ticket that comes in, and then that would give some discretion for a situation where there was a funeral procession, there was a emergency vehicle with its lights illuminated passing through a red light. Obviously, those are not appropriate for
The
penalty.
reason I asked the question is because it says here to consider final adoption. I think it's premature. I think we have to get some of these facts before we consider final adoption.
The final adoption is of the ordinance that would authorize us to
Sure.
to accept such a system. It does not obligate the city to go forward. If we get proposals from various companies and none of them are acceptable, we're not obligated to contract with any of them. All this does is add to our ordinances a civil penalty and a due process system so that it's not simply based on the criminal penalties for getting pulled over and running a red light or speeding.
What are the penalties again?
The penalties for the two different sets of them. The first one is found at 25-85.1, and it is addressing the traffic signal violation is $125. If it's a speed violation, it's based on how fast over the limit the vehicle is traveling.
$25 to $100.
To $150, and then if there is subsequent violations within a 12-month period, there's an additional penalty to that.
Are these fees set by the standards that the Alexandria Police Department currently use based on the citations that would be given by using those cameras? Am I correct?
I'm sorry, I
I said,
didn't
are
understand
these
your question.
fees set that you're mentioning right now set by the standards that the Alexandria Police Department currently use right now?
These are new fees,
Or new fees?
new fees.
Okay, is that an increase or decrease?
It's less than,
It's less than the criminal fee. We don't set the fees, the courts.
The courts, yeah, yes, ma'am.
and there's not court cost, because it's not going to Judge Starling's courtroom. It's going through a civil administrative hearing if the person requests. So if they get their photo and they see that was their car, and they know that for whatever reason they ran that red light and they don't fit one of these defenses, then they can simply pay the penalty. If they want to have a hearing, then they have to post a $30 bond for the administrative hearing. And if they are successful in having it dismissed, then of course they're refunded that money, and it doesn't cost them anything but their time.
You say we haven't decided whether we're going to administer the issuing of the citation in-house or whether we're contracted out. Are they contracting amount of 3%, you're saying? Is that the percentage they get?
Oh, on the process, actually, that would be, there are different fees if they handle additional processing. They had various fee structures, and
I just wanna make
that
sure we
wasn't
don't
really the topic of our
Put anything on the
ordinance.
police department. I know they're pretty tight right now with having police officers reviewing tickets.
Exactly, that's exactly what Chief Cootie wants to do with it, is have an officer designated to do the reviews.
We have an additional officer with it all.
Within the, correct.
Chief Cootie does endorse this, does he not?
Oh, yes, this was his original idea.
Okay.
Even before, I think even before the particular presenter came before this body, they had approached him several months back, and he was very in favor of it.
Okay.
I think this, were you out there with us on Jackson Street? It's one that fits in, were you out there? No, I think it was Fidel and them, who helps in traffic. But I think they do have this unit that it fits in a van, and that necessary, that your police officer can run this unit. And it gives the time, the speed, and it takes the pictures. And if you got an area, that in the city that people doing a lot of violations, one of our officers, and it fits in this unit, and then they set it in it. And they can do it themselves, huh?
Like in the schools.
Yeah, they can do it themselves. Okay, I need a motion.
So moved.
Lost. Well, you submitted. Anything else come for legal? That's it.